All right, so ready to dive into the world of 17th century Europe.
Always up for a good time travel adventure.
Okay, well, picture this swirling courtly dances, political intrigue, a world steeped in tradition.
Sounds pretty elaborate.
Now imagine a queen who just tosses all that aside, defies every single expectation of the era.
Someone who likes to shake things up a bit.
It's putting it mildly. And that's exactly who we're going to be exploring today, Queen Christina of Sweden.
Ah, yes, the queen who chose books over ballrooms and abdicated her throne, decided, you know what, I'm going to live life on my own terms.
Precisely.
I think what's really wild about Christina's story is that she was literally born to a world where everyone had their role, very rigid societal norms.
Right, like this is how it is, and this is how it's going to be.
Exactly, but Christina just refused to be confined by any of that.
She was a rebel from the start, huh?
Pretty much. I mean, her story really makes us rethink what we think we know about power, about ambition, about the choices we make when society's telling us to go one way. We're like, nope, not doing it.
Well, it's interesting because it seems like from the moment she was born, Christina was already turning heads. I mean, get this. She was initially mistaken for a boy.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Because of, well, her physical characteristics, if you will.
I was reading about that. Apparently, she was covered in this fine, downy hair when she was born. And she had a really strong voice, even as a newborn.
Can you imagine? Everyone's like, it's a prince. It's a prince.
Total chaos.
And then, plot twist, not a prince.
So how did her father, King Gustavus Adolphus, react to this little, well, mix-up?
Well, you gotta remember, he was desperate for an heir. He'd already lost a number of children, so, a healthy baby, it was a reason to celebrate.
So he wasn't bothered by the whole gender thing.
Nope. Didn't care one bit. He was just over the moon to have a healthy child to carry on the family legacy. And that's exactly what he did, raise Christina as his heir, defying all those expectations of the court.
That's pretty forward-thinking for the 17th century, right?
You could say that. I mean, he was determined to prepare her for the throne, regardless of what society dictated.
But I've also heard that her relationship with her mother, Maria Eleonora, wasn't exactly sunshine and roses.
Yeah. No, not quite. There are some historical accounts suggesting that Maria Eleonora was, well, less than thrilled about Christina's gender, to put it mildly.
It sounds like their relationship was pretty strained.
It seems that way, yeah. There's even a record of her calling Christina a monster when it was discovered that she wasn't a boy, after all.
Wow. I mean, talk about a difficult childhood. Imagine navigating those family dynamics.
Yeah, and then on top of that, her father, the king, was off fighting in the 30 Years' War.
So she didn't even have that paternal figure around much.
Not really. It was a chaotic time in Europe, with all this conflict and religious tension and everything. And then tragedy strikes. When Christina was only 6, her father was killed in battle.
Oh, wow. I hadn't realized she was so young when that happened.
Yeah, just a little girl when suddenly she's thrust into the spotlight, becomes queen in waiting. Imagine the weight of that at such a tender age.
That's a lot for anyone to handle, let alone a child.
It was a daunting task, to say the least. But Christina had a bit of a secret weapon, you could say, her education.
She was a pretty bright kid, right?
Oh, incredibly bright. She was placed under the care of Axel Oxenstierna, a really skilled statesman, and he made sure she got an amazing education. Fit for a king, really.
So while other kids her age were, I don't know, playing games or whatever, she's studying politics and philosophy.
Basically. She was devouring subjects like, politics, philosophy, theology, all of it. Became fluent in at least 7 languages.
7? Wow.
Yeah, it was clear from a very young age that Christina had a brilliant mind, like a sponge, just soaking up all this knowledge.
So even amidst all that chaos, war, political uncertainty, she's hitting the books hard.
Absolutely. It was almost like an escape for her, immersing herself in this world of knowledge and ideas. But even with that incredible education, I'm sure the pressure to conform, especially as a young queen, was intense.
Oh, I bet. Everyone expecting her to follow the traditional path.
Right. As she gets older, the whispers start, when's she going to get married? Who's going to be the lucky guy? When are we getting an heir?
Classic royal drama.
But, and here's the thing, Christina was having none of it. Flat out refused to play that game. Even declared at one point, I am simply not suited to marriage.
Mic drop moment.
Pretty much. I mean, talk about defying expectations.
It really does make you wonder what was driving her to make these choices.
It's a question that still fascinates historians today. Was it a genuine distaste for marriage? Was she rebelling against those limitations placed on women?
Or maybe a bit of both.
Possibly. It's fascinating, right? I mean, here she is groomed to rule a nation, yet she's forging her own path, even if it means challenging centuries of ingrained tradition.
It's like she was saying, I was born to rule, yes, but I'll rule on my own terms.
And you got to remember, this is the 17th century. Women were expected to be, well, let's just say their options were pretty limited. But Christina, she had different aspirations.
Seems like she understood that power could take many forms, didn't have to fit this predefined box.
Exactly. And she definitely wasn't afraid to wield that power. But instead of focusing on marriage, finding a king to share the throne with, she turns her attention to something else entirely, transforming Stockholm into a cultural hub.
So while other rulers are busy, fighting wars and forging alliances, she's creating an artistic haven.
Pretty much. She establishes a theater, appoints a court poet, and even invites, like, the biggest thinkers of the day to Sweden. René Descartes, for example.
Descartes? Wait, wasn't there a bit of an incident with him?
Oh, yeah. Sadly, poor Descartes wasn't built for the Swedish winters. He caught pneumonia and died shortly after arriving.
A bit of a tragic end to that intellectual collaboration.
Yeah, it's like a reminder that even the brightest minds can be felled by, a simple cold.
But still, Christina's efforts to bring art and science to the forefront, that was pretty significant, right?
No, absolutely. She cultivated this environment where ideas could flourish, and it left a real mark on Swedish culture. But we got to remember, all this is happening against the backdrop of the 30 Years' War.
Right. Europe was still a pretty volatile place. Didn't Christina actually play a part in bringing that war to an end?
She did, became deeply involved in the peace negotiations, often clashing with her old mentor, Oxenstierna.
Oxenstierna. He was her regent, right?
That's him. Seems they had very different ideas about how things should go down. Oxenstierna had his own ambitions for Sweden, wanted to leverage their position for more power.
Ah, so realpolitik versus idealism.
You got it. Christina was all about securing peace, even if it meant giving up some territory.
So it was a clash of worldviews.
Definitely. And this tension, it kind of comes to a head in one of the most dramatic moments of Christina's reign, her abdication.
Wait, are we talking about the moment she decides, at 27 years old, to just walk away from the throne?
That's the one. Shocked all of Europe. I mean, a queen in her prime just saying, I'm out.
Okay, I definitely need to hear more about that.
We'll get there, don't worry. But first, let's just take a moment. I mean, we're talking about a queen who defied gender norms, embraced intellectual pursuits, and basically turned the concept of power on its head.
She was a revolutionary, in a way.
Absolutely. And we're just scratching the surface of her story. So last we left off, Christina had made this, well, pretty shocking decision to abdicate.
Yeah, I mean, 27 years old. Walking away from all that power and prestige, you have to wonder what was going through her mind.
It definitely baffled people at the time, and honestly, historians are still kind of scratching their heads about it today. I mean, the official reason was burnout, the pressures of ruling.
Right, but there had to be more to it, right?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I think it ran much deeper than that. I mean, think about it. Christina, she was all about intellectual freedom, personal autonomy, maybe even a sense of adventure.
Like she'd spent her whole life in this gilded cage, and she was finally ready to break free.
Yeah, exactly. She'd gotten a taste of the world of knowledge and ideas. Compared to that, the Swedish court must felt, well, pretty stifling.
I can see that. But it's not like she just quietly stepped down, right?
Oh, no, 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 no. This was Christina we're talking about. She turned her abdication into a full-blown spectacle.
Didn't she, remove her own crown during the ceremony?
She did. Can you imagine? The grand hall, all these courtiers and dignitaries watching, and Christina just reaches up and takes the crown off her own head.
Talk about a power move.
Right. It was like she was rejecting the whole institution of monarchy. But so, what happens next? What does Christina do after she ditches the crown?
Yeah, does she just
What?
disappear? Go live in a cottage somewhere?
Not quite. Leaving Sweden was just the start of her next chapter. She takes off on this grand tour of Europe, attends all these fancy parties, meets with intellectuals.
So living her best life.
In a way, yes. But it was more than just pleasure-seeking. It was like a quest for knowledge, experience, maybe even a new identity.
She was reinventing herself.
Exactly. But of course, there's another twist coming.
There's always another twist with Christina.
Right. So, get this, she converts to Catholicism.
Whoa, hold up. Didn't we talk about Sweden being pretty hardcore Lutheran?
Yep. And for a former queen to convert to Catholicism, total scandal.
So what led to that? Some kind of, divine revelation?
Well, some people think it had to do with her relationship with a Jesuit secretary back in Sweden. Apparently, they had these deep philosophical discussions, and Christina, well, She found herself drawn to the Catholic faith.
Sounds like a more of a gradual thing then, not a sudden aha
Hmm.
moment.
It seems that way. But, Christina never did anything halfway. She embraced her new faith completely, traveled to Rome, the center of the Catholic world, and they rolled out the red carpet for her.
I remember reading about that. The Pope himself arranged this massive reception for her.
Thousands of people came out to see her, camels, elephants, the whole 9 yards. She was a celebrity.
She may have given up one crown, but she was still treated like royalty.
Absolutely. But with Christina, there's always that question lurking in the background.
Which is,
Was it all really about faith? Or was there something else going on?
she always did have a knack for political maneuvering.
Right. I mean, think about it. She abdicated, yes, but she never actually gave up her claim to the Swedish throne. And there were whispers that she might be looking for a new throne somewhere else. Naples, maybe?
So the ambition was still there.
It seems so. And her time in Rome, it wasn't all just parties and intellectual salons. There was a lot of political scheming going on.
She was building a network.
Exactly. Gathering allies, testing the waters, but then things take a dark turn.
This is where the Monaldeschi incident comes in, right?
Yeah, this guy, Monaldeschi, he was Christina's master of the house, basically her right-hand man.
Trusted confidant.
Exactly, until Christina finds out that he's been betraying her, leaking her private letters.
She doesn't take that lightly.
Nope, has him executed right there in her own palace.
Pretty brutal. It's hard to square that with the image of Christina as this, enlightened patron of the arts.
It definitely complicates her legacy. Some historians see it as a sign of just how ruthless she could be. Others think it was more of a desperate act.
A woman who felt betrayed and vulnerable.
Yeah, I mean, it's a reminder that power, no matter who wields it, can have a corrupting influence.
That's dark side.
For sure. But even after all that, Christina keeps thriving in Rome, becomes this major patron of the arts, supports musicians, playwrights, artists. Her palace was basically a hub of creativity.
So she was still defying expectation.
In a way, yeah. Created her own kind of court, one based on intellect and art, rather than, traditional power structures.
A court in exile.
Exactly. And she even challenged the Catholic Church on some things. One of the most surprising things she did was advocate for the Jewish community in Rome.
Yeah, wasn't that during a time when anti-Semitism was pretty widespread?
It was. But Christina, she spoke out against the persecution of Jews, even pressured the Pope to stop this practice of chasing Jews through the streets during Carnival.
Pretty bold move. Makes you wonder about her motivations, though.
Right. Was it genuine empathy or a calculated political move? Hard to say for sure.
Like, was she trying to position herself as a protector of the marginalized?
Possibly. I mean, Christina was a complicated person, full of contradictions.
Ruthless and compassionate.
Yeah.
Ambitious and idealistic.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes her story so fascinating. She was a real person, flaws and all, trying to make her way in a world that didn't always make sense.
And doing it on her own terms.
Absolutely. There's this great description of Christina from a French writer who visited Rome. He said she had messy hair, wore men's clothing, and even had a bit of a beard.
Huh. Sounds like she'd fully embraced her own unique style.
She was done with the whole playing the part of a queen thing. She was just Christina. Brilliant, eccentric, and totally unconventional.
Love it.
Yeah.
But so she stays in Rome for the rest of her life.
Mostly, yeah. But the story doesn't end there. There's one more twist coming, one final journey that will really test her.
Oh, I got to hear.
It all has to do with the Swedish throne. And a chance for Christina to reclaim what she once walked away from.
All right, so we followed Christina from the Swedish court to Rome, seen her embrace Catholicism and become this patron of the arts. But you were saying something about one final twist and journey that really tested her. Something about the Swedish throne, right?
Exactly. It all starts with the death of her cousin, King Charles Gustavus. This is in 1660. And his heir, well, he's just a kid. Sweden's in a pretty vulnerable spot.
Ah, I see where this is going. So Christina sees an opportunity.
You could say that. I mean, she never actually renounced her claim to the throne. And even though she built this whole new life in Rome, maybe a part of her still longed for that power, that influence.
Plus, ruling a stable and prosperous Sweden probably sounded pretty good compared to, well, being a queen without a country.
Right. There's a sense of duty, too, a sense of responsibility for her homeland. But there's a big problem.
Yeah, her whole Catholicism thing.
Exactly. I mean, Sweden was deeply Lutheran. The idea of a Catholic monarch. Not going to go over well.
So what did she do?
Well, she travels back to Sweden, tries to negotiate her return. But her Catholicism, it's a deal breaker. The Swedish parliament, they just won't accept her.
Wow, that must have been a crushing blow. To return to her homeland only to be rejected.
It's a turning point for her, a moment of reckoning. She realizes that the Swedish throne, it's just not in the cards, so she heads back to Rome.
A queen without a kingdom. Again. So does she just go back to her life of art and philosophy and all that? Or is she, completely heartbroken?
It's not that simple. I mean, she does return to that world, her salons and her patronage. But the experience changes her. There's a sadness there, a sense of unfulfilled potential.
It's kind of tragic when you think about it.
It is. But even in these later years, Christina never loses that fire, that spark. She continues to challenge norms, speak her mind.
So what was she like in these final years? Any interesting anecdotes?
Oh, plenty. People who knew her described her as witty, sharp-tongued, super intelligent, obviously, loved a good debate, even with the most learned scholars. But she was also known for her generosity, her loyalty to those she trusted.
Felt like she was a real mix of contradictions.
Absolutely. Kind, but ruthless when she needed to be. Deeply intellectual, but also impulsive at times. And that's what makes her story so captivating, right? She wasn't just a name in a history book. She was a real person, flaws and all.
Trying to find her place in a world that didn't always make sense.
Exactly. And she did it in such a dramatic way. I mean, it's no wonder her life has inspired so many books and films and even operas.
So how should we remember Christina? What's her legacy?
I think she's a trailblazer. A woman who defied expectations, challenged gender norms. We celebrate her intellect, her love for the arts, her pursuit of personal freedom. But we also have to acknowledge those darker moments. The Monaldeschi execution, her failed attempt to reclaim the throne.
It's complicated legacy.
Sure. It reminds us that even the most brilliant and unconventional lives are messy. But ultimately, Christina's story is one of courage, of conviction, and the power of staying true to yourself even when the world is pushing you in a different direction.
Well said. And to our listeners, if you're intrigued by Christina, don't stop here. There are amazing biographies, historical analyses, even fictional accounts that bring her story to life.
It's a journey worth taking. And as always, remember that history is full of fascinating figures like Christina, people who challenge our assumptions and make us rethink the past. So keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the stories that shape our world.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the life of Queen Christina of Sweden. We'll be back soon with another fascinating trip through history. Until then, stay curious.